That's a good old Lutheran song I remember from Luther Memorial School, way back in the day when I was little and young and tiny and my hair was black. Or brown. Chupa Chupa has something in the treasure box this morning. He said he wanted me to make sure to show you. So here we go. Ready? Let's see. It's kind of scary. You want to see it? Kind of scary. It's a ghost. But it's only a little ghost. So it's only a little scary, I guess. Huh? That's pretty good. I'm glad it isn't a big ghost, because then it would be a lot scary, right? But a little ghost is only a little scary. You know, there's lots of scary stuff around, right? And if you go to Drug Mart or Walmart or Packagans, there's all kinds of scary stuff in there because they're getting ready for Halloween already. I know, you just started school and already they're getting ready for Halloween. And Halloween is a time of scary things. But there's also lots of other scary things out there. We have a little group of adult people who've started meeting on Tuesdays that we're calling the wrestling team, and we're wrestling with ideas and issues that people are just having trouble coming to grips with and thinking about. And we decided that maybe the best thing to do would be to find the Republican Party platform and the Democratic Party platform for 2012. I found them. I put them online on the website of the wrestling team, and you can find them if you look it up. Talk about scary! Oh my gosh! I mean, I looked at those and it was like, oh my goodness, scary stuff! Ugh, send shivers down your spine. We get scared about, there's a lot of stuff out there to make us afraid, isn't there? Oh my goodness, I always get the newspaper on Sunday morning when I come in. There's scary stuff in there. And you just don't know what to do with it sometimes because it's so scary. So I found these little boxes at Pat Catan's yesterday. Here's one. It looks kind of scary. This is all set and ready for Halloween. You know, this one says, beware. And it's got ghosts and bats and beware. And this looks like the kind of box that, should I open it? Yeah, might be scary. Might be a skeleton. Might be a vampire. Let's open it. Huh? Oh! There's a big spider. And there's his brother. And there's a couple of bats. See that? That's Batman and that's Batgirl. But otherwise, there's nothing in there really to be scared of, see? I mean, it just kind of looked like it might be. Sometimes things look like they're really scary, but when we think about them and really think hard and open them up, it's not all as scary as we thought they might be. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And so what we do is we learn that things aren't always as scary as they seem. Here's the other one. This is a nice box also, kind of like that one. What do you think we'd find in it if we opened it up? It's kind of scary looking too, but this one has in it a water bottle and some flowers. Not scary stuff at all, is it? See, so one of the things we do is we begin to learn that the things that seem scary maybe aren't. So Isaiah comes along, the friend of God, and he says, here's the way God works, gang. God works like this. In the desert there will be pools of water bubbling up. I don't know if you can even imagine that. Imagine a desert with lots and lots of sand and sand dunes and everything. Okay? And all of a sudden you're walking through the desert, and all of a sudden you trip over something. And it's a stash of water bottles that just keep popping up all over the place. I don't know how that would happen. There's a lot of people that, no, that's not possible. Okay? You can't even imagine that. Deserts don't work like that, right? I mean, if you thought that would happen, you'd know you were having a mirage or a dream, or you were in some kind of science fiction movie or something, you know, and pretty soon along would come, I don't know, The Princess Bride or somebody, you know. But it would be all a fantasy. Okay? Because things just don't work that way, right? We tend to say, we know how the world is supposed to work. And even the things that seem scary, we'll figure those out eventually. The desert never has water in it in bottles. The desert never has flowers like this in sand dunes. It just doesn't. Okay? We know that. Now, sometimes we get optimistic about the things that are scary. Like, for instance, we could say, this looked scary, but it wasn't so much. This looked scary, but it had nice things in it. So chances are that there are things that could look just as scary that really aren't. And you could build on that, and you could say, okay, things that look scary probably aren't as scary as they are. That's called optimism. Okay? That's it. Gamblers do that all the time. You know, what are the odds that something actually scary is going to be in there? Well, based on our observation so far, not much. It's either going to be just a little goofy or it's going to be pretty. So, our optimism says what we've seen so far is that scariness really doesn't matter on the outside, because the inside is beautiful stuff. And you could go along through life doing that. Okay? That's what optimism is. Whatever we've seen and whatever we've experienced all throughout history, that all comes together as evidence, and you know, it's all on the internet, it's all on Google or Wikipedia, you know, you can look it up. What are the chances, what are the odds that something that looks scary is going to actually be that scary? Not so much. Okay. So I look at the Republican thing and I look at the Democratic thing and I think, yeah, okay, maybe they won't be quite as scary as they seem to be. That's optimism. But in the song we sing, we talked about hope. And hope is different. Hope is an easier word to say, but it's a harder word to hang on to. Optimism is, everybody can see that this might happen. Hope is, nobody has ever seen this happen. And hope is about what God does. It has nothing to do with all the things that we can figure out. Hope is God saying, go out into the desert where there's no water, and I will put a lake there. Hope is God saying, go out into the desert where there has never been any kind of plant ever, and I'll make it grow with flowers. That's what hope is. That's what God talks about. It's way beyond what we can think or imagine or begin to believe. God can do something beyond anything that we have ever experienced. That's hope. Now, part of the problem with hope is a little scary, because we haven't experienced anything like that. So we're a little intimidated to try. But here's a couple of pretty good Bible stories about trying. Jesus is with his disciples, and they get out of the boat on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. They're no longer among the Jewish people. They're with the Greeks. Okay? Now, the Greeks and the Jews didn't have a whole lot to do with each other except to buy and sell stuff. But other than that, they weren't very friendly at all. So Jesus is on the other side of the lake with his disciples, and they're with these Greek people. And, they talk funny, and they drink ouzo instead of wine, and they say opa a lot, and things like that. And so this woman comes to Jesus, and she's heard about him, even though she's Greek. She's heard about him, and she's heard that he heals people. So she comes to him and says, "My daughter has a demon. Will you do something for her? Can you heal her?" Now, nobody has ever done that, as far as she can tell. I know a lot of Greek stories. I know a lot of Greek myths, about Apollo and those guys. Nobody's ever done that. There aren't any stories about people getting rid of demons. She must know those. There aren't any stories about that. But she comes to Jesus because she's heard he might. This is well beyond. So she says, maybe he can. And Jesus, wonderful Jesus, loving Jesus, kind, generous, helpful, tender Jesus, looks at this poor woman whose daughter has a demon. And he says to her, you don't take the bread off the table and give it to the dogs instead of the kids. Why should I help you? Nobody knows what to do with this, by the way. Okay, this is like the absolutely most racist thing that Jesus has ever said. And it's there in the Gospels, in more than one. And nobody knows what to do. Why would Jesus make such a racist statement? The answer is, I have no idea either. Except maybe to see what's going to happen next. And what happens next is the woman says, well, yeah, okay, but the dogs are there under the table. The crumbs would fall off, and crumbs do fall off when you've got little kids involved. And sometimes the crumbs fall off accidentally, and sometimes the crumbs fall off because the kids push them off because they want to see the dogs eat the crumbs, So Jesus says, fair enough, okay, go ahead, you go home, your daughter's healed. She goes home, the demon is gone, but here's the hope. The hope is that even beyond that incredibly racist statement of Jesus that sounds like there is no way on this earth that he's going to do anything for her, she still has hope that he will. See? Optimism would say, that's it, we're done. He's not going to do anything. Hope says, he will. Now you come to these people, so then Jesus goes on, and you come to these people who bring him this man who is deaf and mute. And by the story, it almost sounds like there's something physical inside, that, an ENT would say, well, we have to do some surgery to loosen up tongue and ear and whatnot, because there's a connection there that, is tied up. And these people this man's friends bring him to Jesus, and Jesus does this miracle surgery with the spit and the touching and the ephatha, be open. And there's a lot of emphasis we can place on that, but the hope part is, in these days, you'd have to have an ear, nose, and throat surgeon specialist right? I mean, the optimistic part is you have an ear, nose, and throat specialist, stick this guy's head in an MRI, take a couple of scans, you know, try and figure out what's going on, do some surgery, maybe this will work, maybe a little physical therapy, you know, months of this kind of stuff. And we're optimistic based on all the other stuff that, you know, that maybe someday he'll hear and he'll be able to speak, yeah, kind of clearly. None of that's available in those days. But these people bring this man to Jesus and say, can you do anything? That's hope. Beyond what anybody has ever experienced, or even in our day. That's hope. I mean, even in our day, you know, we have people who cannot hear and they cannot speak, and that's what we would do. I mean, the optimistic thing is what we would do, right? We'd go to surgeons, we'd go to hearing specialists and so forth. Hope is when we go to Jesus and say, put your finger in that guy's ears and heal him. And Jesus does it because he's God. And God does things that we can never expect, and that's what hope is. And then, here's the incredible part. It's not only that Jesus does these things because he's God, and that's what hope is, but it's that as we live together in this church, in this community, as one, as we've talked about numerous times in the last weeks, we know what Jesus has done for us. We know what God has done for us already and how he's made us his children and all those wondrous things. We know what he's done for us. What we do for one another, and one of the great things the Holy Spirit helps us do among us, is that we can hope for one another when there is a person or people in our group for whom hope is difficult. You know, like the little girl in the story. She's just mentioned as she's the daughter of this woman that Jesus makes this racist comment to, and blah, blah, blah. But here's a little girl who has a demon that is possessing her. What kind of hope can she express? How does she have hope in what Jesus is going to do? I don't know. But her mother comes to Jesus and she hopes for her. Right? She comes to Jesus and she says, on my daughter's behalf, Jesus, I believe that you can do something I've never, ever heard of before. Cast this demon out for her, please, because she doesn't even know how to begin to imagine that herself. That's what we do together in the family of God. Because sometimes there are those among us who just can't express the hope, or we just don't know. We lost all the hope. We feel like we're at that point, like Jesus on the cross. You know, my God, why have you forsaken me? Or like the people who brought this man, who he's deaf, he doesn't speak. He's been sitting on, probably in that culture, he's been sitting at the side of the road for years. He's on an old army blanket, it's all dirty, it's got stains, you know, and stuff, and he's been begging, but he can't beg because he can't speak, so he's got a little sign, you know, deaf and mute. He's got a little cup that he, you know, jangles for people to toss coins in, this kind of stuff. He may have no hope either, and he may have no optimism either, because he knows his life is just going to drag on like this for the next how many years, because it's already been that way. But he has friends who hope for him, and they bring him to Jesus. And they say, Jesus, will you help him? And Jesus does. And we hear stories like that again and again and again of people who hope in Jesus for other people. And you know what? We even hear people who hope for other people after those people are dead. You know, Lazarus in the tomb for 4 days. And Jesus comes along and says, roll away the stone. And sure, yeah, after 4 days he stinketh. Yeah, that's true. But, you know, the other sister says, I believe you are the resurrection and the life. That's hope. Now, hope is, for us, not that life stops there, but hope is knowing that despite centuries of historical evidence that people die and are buried and stay buried, hope is that this person, after 3 days, he riseth, and one of these days you and I also will be riseth and live forever with him. No, that doesn't mean that things will always be peachy for us. That doesn't mean that we can afford to be optimistic all the time, because sometimes life is pretty scary for some good reasons. But it does mean that there is hope in Jesus. There is hope in what Jesus has done and continues to do for us. And it does mean that as Christians together, if you find that your hope in Jesus is at a low ebb, let us know and ask us to hope for you, like the woman, like those friends. We'll ask us to do what Isaiah said and say to you, our God reigns. The economy may look bad, but God reigns. The government may have a problem, but Jesus is king. Things may be scary, but Jesus is Lord. You may not know which end is up some days, but Jesus has risen. Let us hope for you. And we will pray that Jesus can do for you what he did for that girl and for that man and for all the people who hope in him, who are his children.